Button smooth as you like.
There's going to be contact.
Oh, there's Vettel. Alex Kubica got Button's a winner again.
I couldn't tell you how sorry I am.
Undrivable, undrivable. I cannot see anything.
Felipe, baby, stay cool.
2 out of 2 for Jenson Button.
This is Formula One.
Good morning, good effort, and welcome to the Chinese Grand Prix live from Shanghai. Now, Australia was all about the perfect start, and Malaysia was the perfect storm. Could China be the perfect race to the finish in pretty difficult conditions? Well, if yesterday's scintillating qualifying is anything to go by, we could be set for something good today, and certainly the 30,000 fans packed into the grandstand behind me are ready for something special. And special pretty much sums up this place. Over 2,000 miles northeast of our last stop in Kuala Lumpur. Just like China, Shanghai is all about size. The track is wide, the straights are long, the grandstand breathtaking and pretty loud. After today, here's the rest of the season. We all travel west to Europe after this, with a quick stop in Bahrain along the way in 7 days' time for race 4. But today, of course, is all about round 3 in the rain here in China. I'm delighted to say David Coulthard is with us once again. And all weekend we've been joined by Mike Gascoigne, who's got 20 years' experience of designing cars, racing and doing quite a bit of it in the rain over the years. You've seen this all before, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately we have, but it's come up very nastily now with the wind and everything, and I think it's going to make it very exciting for everyone, especially the guys out there driving. It's going to be tough conditions.
We'll talk about what this means for the drivers with you in just a moment, DC, but let's talk about you. And you as well, Mike. This isn't the first time you two have met. This is no BBC exclusive, is it?
No, indeed. The first time I drove a Formula One car, Mike was there, part of the engineering crew for McLaren. So I think that was 1990. You had a bit more hair then, and mine was a bit fluffier, more natural colour. Yeah, I think we can see it there on the image. So that's where it all started. I was 19 at that point.
Yeah, I don't know who that was more embarrassing for, David or me, but the one thing I remember from that, the weather conditions were pretty much like they are now, absolutely horrendous. And I also remember walking into the truck to brief David to find him putting on the most unpleasant pair of underpants that I've ever seen.
DC, what was that all about?
I was on a budget in those days, but thankfully I've upgraded since then, so not so shocking if you catch me in underpants now.
Well, I think that's what made all my hair drop out, because I obviously had more then. It was the shock of that sight.
And one thing you haven't mentioned, but I'm sure you did think of this as well, what a talented driver he must have been back then, eh?
Actually, he did a hell of a good job, because the weather conditions were horrendous. I remember feeling pretty sorry for him in his first ever drive in a Formula One car to have to do it in those conditions, and he did a great job.
Well done. Right, well, another man who's done a very good job indeed so far this season is Jenson Button. Let's take a quick look at both the driver and the constructor standings as they are at the moment. And of course, just to remind you that after this week's hearing in Paris, these points all stand. Jenson Button top there with 15, followed by Rubens Barrichello just 5 points behind. Jarno Trulli with 8.5, and you can see 3 drivers there with half points. That, of course, is because, just to remind you, 2 weeks ago in Malaysia, we didn't make it 2/3 through the race, so half points were awarded. And look at that, Brawn starting to streak out ahead there. Almost a 10-point lead at the moment over Toyota, and McLaren down in 8th place. Ferrari yet to get themselves a point. Those are the standings at the moment. And of course, why we're all here is to win races and win points. But so far this season, qualifying has thrown up some headlines as well. In Australia, it was Lewis Hamilton starting from the back. 2 weeks ago in Malaysia, Felipe Massa played it too cool and missed the cut. And all along, Jenson Button's been bagging himself a couple of pole positions. Well, there were more headlines made yesterday, and we can now hear all about them from Lee McKenzie.
The sun split through the smog as qualifying got underway in China. After a week of fighting in the courtroom, it was finally time for the drivers to show their muscle on the track. And it was clear early on that some were packing a bigger punch than others. Robert Kubica's BMW out in Q1.
Bourdais, Piquet, Kubica, Sutil, Fisichella It's all over.
I faced some problems with the tires, with soft tire. Additionally, I have lost the car in corner 12 on the braking, so I lost a lot of lap time there, and yeah, that's how it is.
Button's gone fast, is on a 35.556.
In Q2, the front of the grid was a Red Bull Brawn lockout, but Vettel left it pretty late. There was time for only one run, and it had to be a good one.
Vettel goes fastest.
Lewis Hamilton managed to achieve his objective and make it into the final session of qualifying, but teammate Heikki Kovalainen was not so lucky.
This was the goal of the team, to finally, bit by bit, make the step forward, and to get into Q3 was great to be back there. And I just have to say to the guys back home, they're doing a fantastic job. Keep churning away, because bit by bit we're catching these cars.
Timo Glock qualified in 14th, but takes a 5-place grid penalty after changing a gearbox on Saturday morning. Also languishing out of the top 10 is Ferrari's Felipe Massa.
Thank you.
Obviously, we do have a slight advantage in terms of grid position. So, we go from there tomorrow, push as hard as we can, and yeah, obviously the target is when you start from pole or wherever you start from, you don't want to get worse. So the target is always winning.
I'm surprised. Obviously, Q3 results are a little bit mixed because the strategy, fuel loads, etc. But even with our strategy that we think is optimal, we knew that maybe it was a little bit aggressive, but we never expect to win first row.
It is a spectacular feeling to see how Formula One progressed so quickly, and you can see, Red Bull. No diffuser, nothing, and they're doing really, really well.
Every circuit's different, and it seems that their car's working on this type of circuit. So, it's obviously competition for us, and it's a pity that we're starting behind them, because that is, it's very tough here to overtake.
So there's a new front runner this week, with Sebastian Vettel giving Red Bull their first ever pole position. Alongside him is the new improved Renault of Fernando Alonso. The second row sees the other Red Bull of Webber, with Rubens Barrichello out qualifying Jenson Button for the first time this season. Kimi Raikkonen starts 8th, and alongside him is fellow world champion Lewis Hamilton. 10th place Toro Rosso rookie Sebastian Buemi is the only driver not to have raced here before. Kovalainen hopes to complete his first racing lap of the season, with Ferrari and Felipe Massa lurking over his shoulder. Toro Rosso's Bourdais starts in 15th after being out-qualified by his inexperienced teammate, whilst BMW's Kubica starts a disappointing 17th. Glock's 5-place penalty puts him 19th. Force India's Fisichella props up the grid.
Yes, we made it! Pole position!
And well, he might let you know that he's number one. What a lap from Sebastian Vettel. And now the aim of the guys that you can see behind me is to take this car from its first pole position to its first win. But of course, ending up first and third on the grid shouldn't be underestimated either. A fantastic effort from the entire team. And who better to get the thoughts of the drivers after yesterday's session than David Coulthard? Of course, Sebastian Vettel now has his seat, and last season he drove alongside Mark Webber.
Well, Sebastian, obviously not many laps at all during that session. Must have been incredible pressure. How did you deal with only having one lap, no room for any error?
Well, I was trying to, forget everything that happens around me. Obviously, we knew that we have a problem with the car, and we didn't know if we would, if it would last for the one run in Q2 and even for the one run in Q3. So we did not expect and did not know that we were that strong in qualifying. I could see Mark always up there in the top 5, so I was pretty confident that I will make it to the next round, and in Q3 then with having the fuel on board, obviously no getting used to it run, so no second chance, and it was good.
You say that the team morale with a result like this, the effect on guys here, obviously back at base as well, you can really feel that?
Yeah, I spoke to one of the aerodynamicists here who spoke to not Adrian, but an aerodynamicist in a pretty high position, and he was nearly in tears because he's had a very, very hard winter, and it was very emotional for him, so that was great to hear.
Obviously you had the old guy of Formula One last year as your teammate. How are you finding this new relationship, and just how much is this making you have to dig deep and pull out the performances?
We got on well. Obviously we want to fight like hell in terms of getting the maximum out of the car and getting the best out of the car means the best out of each other in general.
Are you comfortable to say what you think Mark's strengths are and vice versa?
Yes, his strengths are he's very, very good. First of all, good driver. I think one of the best in Formula One, and especially strong in qualifying. So it's not easy to beat him there. And I know his weakness. Well, maybe that's more a problem that I only have, is to understand every time what exactly he's saying, because he's talking with this Australian slang and very, very quick. So sometimes I'm still struggling, but it's getting better.
Mark?
He's quick. So yeah, it's a you know, you don't often talk about obviously your rivals, but obviously he's got a great future. But also, you know, I'm looking forward to you know, working hard together and improving. If we can even help our own weaknesses in a funny sort of way, it might happen this year. So make us better drivers again.
Well, coming back to this weekend, Rubens Barrichello has been quoted as saying that very surprised by the performance of Red Bull in qualifying. You any idea why he would be so surprised with the performance you've put in there?
We still think the Brawn is still a very, very fast car. There's no question about it. They're heavier than us in qualifying, and they're not a million miles off us in terms of pace. So we're expecting them to be a force in the race. A lot of uncharted waters in terms of what the tyres are going to do in the race, and that's what he knows what they've got. We know what we've got. We're both going to find out tomorrow. So in terms of what the tyres will do,
I think the big secret is the tires and how well you cope with your tires, you handle your tires during the race. And the soft one is not working at all, but the hard one is also struggling. So you cannot rely on one of the compounds only. So everyone will have, it's the same for everyone. Everyone will have difficulties tomorrow, and the one who manages best and has the best package and does the best job probably wins the race. So we are pushing very hard. I think we have a good car, so let's see tomorrow.
Well, DC, let's not underestimate what a fantastic effort it is by everybody in this garage. And we've spoken about how calm and cool Sebastian Vettel is. The mechanics look just as cool as him.
Yeah, there they are talking just before going to the grid. It's always incredible. You know, these guys are extremely well briefed to deal with all these different scenarios. Throwing in a wet start to a Grand Prix stresses the situation more than at any other time, because they have to take 3 sets of different tyres to the grid. Obviously the slick tyres that they would normally run, the intermediates and the wet, and they'll wait for the final decision from the driver as to which one he wants to start the Grand Prix on.
I know that you don't feel like you've got any unfinished business in Formula One and that you're quite enjoying your role with us on the BBC, but how much would you like to be sitting in this on pole today?
Well, you know, this is a real privilege for us to be this close to a car, especially a pole position car, before it starts the Grand Prix. So you don't get any closer to the action. And, you know, I'm extremely proud of the work that the team have done here. Obviously, I had 4 seasons as a driver, and we're seeing the results of all their hard work over that period.
So less than 44 minutes to race starts here for the Shanghai Grand Prix in China. You can see behind me the pit lane is starting to get very busy indeed. Still to come, we'll be chatting to all the big players ahead of today's race. We'll hear from Jenson Button very shortly, but first here's a roundup of the news from the last few days in Formula One.
A legend of Formula One has retired from the sport. Ron Dennis has left the McLaren team after 29 years and 20 drivers and constructors championships to head up McLaren's new road car company. His withdrawal from the sport is being seen as an effort to appease the FIA ahead of McLaren's World Motorsport Council hearing after Bahrain, even though the team are denying anything so overt. McLaren have also stated that Ron had nothing to do with the team misleading the stewards in Melbourne. The feeling from the management, though, is that they can demonstrate to the FIA that sporting director Dave Ryan acted alone, and that by removing him, they've changed their culture as a team.
We accept the seriousness of what has occurred, and we are working hard to change the culture of the business.
The The FIA Court of Appeal have cleared the Brawn, Williams and Toyota teams' diffusers this week, which means the results of the first 2 races remain unchanged. The other 7 teams will now copy them. McLaren have already brought their first version of a double-deck diffuser here, and Renault have one in China for Fernando Alonso, but Ferrari say they won't have their version until the Spanish Grand Prix in May. The gain from these diffusers is so much that Red Bull, who are on pole today, say they too need to copy the clever diffuser if they're to have any chance of regular race wins.
You know, the way to go is still with you know, the slotted floor now, and we know it's guaranteed performance.
Meantime at Ferrari, after just 2 races completed and no points scored, Kimi Raikkonen has given up hope of winning this year's World Championship.
We're never going to be in a position anymore to win the championship, but hopefully we can improve the car and try to win some races later on this season. So I think that's a realistic aim.
His words will not go down well with Ferrari or their sponsors, although the team boss agrees it will take a mammoth effort to catch the leading pack.
We don't want to say we have already put out the white flag, because this is not our spirit. We will fight up to the moment where the mathematics is not, how can I say, clear. But for sure, the championship is taking a very clear direction.
Ferrari have dropped Kurz this weekend following reliability problems in Malaysia. Meanwhile, both Renaults down and lead to higher tyre wear. And finally, Red Bull are confident they've cured pole sitter Sebastian Vettel's reliability problem in qualifying. A leaking drive shaft seal came from a bad batch from the manufacturers.
We will obviously look to change that component as it has been damaged during qualifying.
Now, if there's one surefire way to annoy a racing driver, it's to give him a set of tyres that he just doesn't like. And there's been an awful lot of moaning here in China this weekend. We'll explain all a little bit later on. But first, here's a word that you might be hearing more than once during the race.
Unless it rains, every driver must use 2 compounds of dry rubber tyre in a Grand Prix. The softer rubber mixtures tend to initially grain when driven hard. The tread of the tyre rips as it slides across the track, forming balls of rubber on the surface. Resulting braking, turning and wheel spin problems mean that it's easy to lose up to 2 seconds per lap. Usually the graining stabilises and then fades away after 5 or so laps as the tyres wear down.
Now, we all know about the Brawn fairy tale, but what about Jenson Button? Promising and popular at the start of the millennium, written off in some quarters last season, he's now the man to beat. Perhaps his time has finally come.
Honda has decided to try to sell its Formula One team.
Honda is talking to 3 potential buyers for its Formula One team.
The announcement puts Jenson Button's driving future into doubt.
It's set to be rebranded in the new season. They will be on the starting grid in a few weeks'
We're away in Melbourne for 2009. Jenson Button is away. Crosses the line, takes the checkered flag.
It's such a great story.
It's 2 out of 2 then for Jenson Button.
It's great to be a part of that. If somebody wanted to make a movie about Formula One, this is the perfect time to do it.
So 3 races since you were last here when you finished 16th. It's quite nice in some ways that it's such a short amount of time ago, but things have changed so drastically for you in such a short space of time.
Here last year was a tough one. I mean, I couldn't get my head around the car here, and obviously we finished developing the car a long time before this race. I just couldn't find a good balance and I was not happy. So coming back here with a competitive car and having won the first 2 races of the season is a great feeling, and I've always enjoyed this circuit. You know, it's a fun circuit to race on.
You say you haven't really been able to get your head around what was wrong with the car last year. Have you got your head around how quickly things can turn around for someone in Formula One? There aren't many sports like it.
Yeah. No, there aren't. I mean, it's because it's not down to one individual. You know, it's down to a big team of people, and in team sports it can turn around reasonably quickly, and that's exactly what has happened here. You know, in a way it's not a shock surprise because we knew that the car was going to be competitive. We've worked very hard on this car, and it's obviously new for everyone. You know, we're not playing catch up. It's the same. You know, everyone has to start at the same level.
Do you feel that in some ways there are a few people that owe you a bit of an apology for the things that were written about you last season?
Not interested. You know, people are going to write negative comments and people are going to write positive comments. And you know, the important thing for me is that I've just won the first 2 races this season. I've put it on pole twice. So really, you know, I go racing for myself and I go racing for the team, and we've achieved as much as we can do so far this year, and that makes me very happy.
You had very limited testing, didn't you, over the winter, but was there a moment where you thought, hold on a minute, I thought the car was good, didn't think it was this good?
Well, I did 5 laps in Barcelona, and I was quickest by 6/10. So that was quite nice.
Yeah, that's quite a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah, and yeah, everything. I think more than the pace of the car. I mean, the pace of the car was good. It was more that the shakedown we did and the test we did, nothing went wrong. You know, not even the panels of the car were burning, which always happens when the car's new, with the exhaust outlet and what have you. And the great thing is the car listened to changes. You know, every time we used the car, it would either be a positive or a negative, but at least it listened to what we changed. And I think that's the reason why over a race weekend we can improve the car and get to the position we're in at the end.
I remember hearing you talk actually before the first race, and you were saying, yeah, the car's quick, but the big worry for you was the sort of reliability problems. Those concerns about reliability, have they now disappeared as well?
They're you know, I think we've cleared up a few of our issues. We have had a few issues in the races, but no more than any other team. So, yeah, coming here, we do know that we need to get everything out of this car. We need to wring its neck to be at the front, because the other teams are very close, and we can't put a foot wrong. You know, when the going gets tough in the races, I just don't think we've got it 100% yet. So there are a few things that we need to improve, and I think we have for this race already, and we'll see if it pays for us in the race.
And you do realise if you say that you haven't even thought about winning the world title, no one will believe you.
Well, it obviously crosses your mind, and you get so many people asking you the question that you need to think about it sometimes, but there's no use thinking about the end goal. You know, we've got to think about now, and if you can keep your nose clean and gain the points at this part of the season, it means a lot at the end of the year when everyone's competitive and everyone's sorting themselves out and not making the mistakes anymore. So this is an important part of the year for us for sure, and this is why we need to concentrate so much on getting the best out of what we have.
And that's exactly what he'll be doing in just over half an hour's time. The race is approaching, just about 35 minutes to go until the race begins. And Jenson Button talked there about keeping his nose clean. And for the first time this season, we'll see how he copes not starting from the front of the grid, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be disappointed in his grid position, mostly for the fact he's been out-qualified by his teammate. Actually, he's got 1 lap less fuel than Ruben, so he should be the one in front. But you've got 3 guys in front of him. OK, they're all on lower fuel. That's fair enough. But I think they'll be disappointed with these conditions, because they could have dropped a little bit of fuel out of that car and put it on the front row. And obviously that's a safer place to be when it's wet.
Yeah, indeed, but we just saw some images of Jenson there talking with his engineer, looking very relaxed ahead of the start of this race. Malaysia, he showed that the car is working in the wet conditions. Just a reminder, he'd never actually driven the car in the wet before that Grand Prix. So I don't think they'll be too concerned, and certainly they've got more fuel on board than the guys in the first 3 positions. So I think they're as well placed to win this Grand Prix as if they were in pole position.
And very quickly, we mentioned that Jenson's time, has it arrived? Do either of you think he can win the world title this year? And say it quietly if you don't, because he's behind us in the garage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that at 29 years old, he's at the right place in his life, maturity-wise, to make the most of this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I mean, when he drove for Renault with me in 2001, he was at the start of a career. I think he's matured a hell of a lot now, and it's the right time for him.
OK, there aren't many drivers that haven't driven for you over the years, of course. Jenson Button might be one of them, as is Jarno Trulli. And believe it or not, for a veteran driver, he's yet to score a point here in China. Therefore, he's surely the perfect man to guide us around and explain to us the tricky tests of this track in the company of Martin.
The Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai. It's a modern, wide and smooth surface. 3.4 miles. It's a challenging combination of slow, medium and high-speed corners, with the longest straight in Formula One at 3/4 of a mile.
This is a unique corner. It's basically a right-hand corner, but it's very, very long, and it ends up in a hairpin, very tight hairpin. I mean, the key of this corner is basically to try to get in as quick as possible.
This corner in last year's Grand Prix.
Bourdais hit me from the back, and then that was it. At the start. Overall, I never had a good score here, but I hope to turn it around this weekend. turn 12, it's such a simple corner, but then it turns out to be the most tricky one. In fact, it's so slow, so you approach it in second gear, but when you want to turn in, you really have such a lot of understeering, so you struggle to get the car in. And then eventually, it opens up, and then you go into turn 13, which is a very, very long right-hand corner. You get a lot of understeering, especially at the mid-exit.
And of course, this is critical because it leads on to a very long straight. This is perfect territory for the KERS systems, I would imagine.
I don't want to think about it because honestly, the first lap with the KERS car behind, that will blow us away.
So, Jarno, surely the perfect overtaking opportunity.
Definitely yes, after such a long straight, if you got enough top speed to follow another car, then you can dive in with a good braking point. And as you can see, it's wide enough, but the hairpin is very tight.
Just 45 miles an hour here. Once you've touched the apex, what are you doing then? What are you looking for?
Well, basically you're gonna go very wide, and then what is very important is the acceleration out, so you need to have a good traction.
Good racetrack for you or not?
Some say yes, I don't say I like it, but it's some way in between a technical one and enjoyable one.
Well, it was Lewis Hamilton's race here last year. He's starting from 9th on the grid. We're not sure whether he'll be picking up the victory shield today, but one thing's for sure, we're set for a great race. It is still raining, and we're now going to make our way out onto the grid, and we'd have to be careful here because the cars come out of the garage at some lick with no warning. They have no horns, these F1 cars, do they?
Yeah, but the engines are loud enough, so I think it would be pretty silly if we got ourselves run down today.
Absolutely. Right, let's have a quick mention of Jarno Trulli then, Mike. We saw him there. How can a guy that's been as successful as him and driven for as long as him not have scored a point at a track like this?
Well, I mean, sometimes either it's an unlucky track for him, he doesn't particularly like it, or, you know, it just happens that way, you get unlucky. I mean, Jarno, for me, he's one of the quickest drivers over one lap that I've ever worked with. You know, he has such finesse and such feeling for the car, and that really does work for him over one lap. But sometimes it can be his undoing, because when the balance of the car goes off, as it does as the tyres change, David will be able to tell you, that seems to affect Jarno more in races than others. If the car's like he was in qualifying for 60 laps, he's unbelievable. But if it goes off, he can struggle.
OK, let's take a wander down to the front of the grid and hang out by the safety car, where I'm sure it'll be a little bit more safer for us. And DC, that's one of the things that we don't speak about much when it comes to racing drivers, that it isn't just to drive the car fast, it's sometimes to drive a car fast that's not as good and retain the belief in yourself and the car.
Yeah, the mind controls the body, not the other way around, and obviously you've got to have a mind that's very much focused on driving the car quickly, making the best of the team situation. And one of the things which I think is interesting to explore later in the year is inter-team rivalries and battles that go on, because obviously you have a team that wants to win, but within that team you have two separate teams, you have the two drivers, and they're battling against each other, so it's a lot of mind games go on.
We mentioned yesterday that you didn't enjoy too much success at this track. What are the specific demands on a driver here?
Physically it's quite tough actually, especially under braking and dry conditions. Today in these wet conditions, and I'm pretty sure it'll be wet the whole race, there won't be the same physical demands in terms of the high G-forces, but the concentration required when you have no traction control, high levels of spray, which they're going to have in the pack, then they'll be working quite hard, because there's long corners here, and long corners in the wet are quite tricky to drive.
Well, I'm pleased to say that the bad weather hasn't put off the fans. We can see 30,000 of them in the grandstand behind us, Mike. But it was a danger, moving this race 6 months earlier than usual, cooler temperatures. We'll talk about the implications of that later. But of course, rain was another issue, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And these conditions are going to be very tricky for everyone, teams and drivers. But also, you know, they haven't run here this weekend on this track in the wet conditions. They won't know whether it's going to be intermediates or the full wet tyre. I think with these conditions, probably they'll look at starting under the full wet tyre, maybe a safety car start, but I would think at the moment probably not.
OK, just about 28 minutes until the race starts. The teams will be getting ready. We'll have a look at what's happening in the garages very shortly, but we can see just here Fernando Alonso, number 7 right there, Mark Webber sitting there. What's it like when you're on pole, DC, and you get out on the parade lap, you come round to the front? Do you sort of feel the extra pressure in that situation?
You're in control of the race when you're in the front, and pole position is obviously the best place to be when you're running down to the first corner. I would have imagined, and certainly I would have been of the mind, that if I was on pole I would want it to be a dry start, because it gives you the best chance of leading into the first turn. these conditions today completely change this race on its head, and the fact of the fuel strategies for qualifying, they're out the window now, because the guy that can run at the right time on the tyre at its prime moment will have the big advantage here. So I think the grid result when we get to the checkered flag here today is going to be quite mixed up.
Now, a few people might be watching this, well, they would have watched that, Jenson Button jogging in there looking very happy indeed and smiling away, but certainly they will have looked at this and thought, hold on a minute, I thought Renault was struggling here. What's Jake talking about? Fernando Alonso on P2. Just explain why you think he's doing so well this weekend, Mike, and what a great driver that makes him.
Well, I mean, first of all, they've had an engineering and aerodynamic update for the car here. After the diffuser ruling that was done this week, they've brought new parts out, they've got more downforce. But also they've dropped fuel out of that car, it's running light. And I think very much Flavio Briatore wanted some good news. They went very aggressive on the strategy, got the front row, that's good for them. Whether they've got the strategy in the race is another thing. But again, when it's like these conditions, that changes everything.
Yeah, when you're starting in the rain and you've got a very tight first corner, number one aim, get there before the guy next to you. And of course, Sebastian Vettel will be hoping he gets to that corner first, as will his team principal, Christian Horner. He's talking to Lee.
Christian, a great day for Red Bull. First ever pole position. How's Sebastian feeling? How is the team feeling?
It was a great day yesterday. I mean, from both drivers, first and third is a great team result. So we've been threatening something like this for the last couple of races, and to deliver it here is very positive for the whole team.
Was it something that you did expect? Because I know, for example, the Brawn team seemed to be very surprised with how quick Red Bulls were.
We could see on Friday that the balance of our car was good, the drivers were happy, and the circuit here for sure suits the car very well. So even with a standard diffuser, we're quite happy with the performance here yesterday.
What about the rain? How much of a spanner is that throwing into the works?
It's a different thing to manage. Obviously, the best place to start visibility-wise is at the front. So, but we're short in the first stint. Aggressive in the first stint. So, both our guys need to get their head down and try and get as big a gap as they can before their first stops.
Adrian Newey and some of the other members of the team are actually back in the factory working hard on this new car. Doesn't look as if you need a new car at this moment in time.
No, Adrian, Peter Bodromo, Rob Marshall, Jeff Willis, they're all flat out, this weekend in the factory with all of their teams, pushing very hard to get the new diffuser to the car as soon as possible. So, the pace of Formula One, you can never stand still for a moment. And we've got a great car, we've got a great basis, but if we want to make the next step, then we have to keep pushing.
Best of luck today.
Thank you very much.
Big day indeed for Christian Horner. They say in life it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think Martin Brundle has made sure that he got to know the perfect person on the grid. What a place to go and stand. Look, we're here, particularly Mike, nice and brave without even a coat on, and you go and stand with the grid girl under an umbrella.
Well, she's quite a bit taller than me, especially with those wonderful boots on, so it seemed the perfect umbrella to stand under.
Well, it was the perfect umbrella against the perfect young lady. Let's have a quick mention about what happens at a time like this, because earlier on we showed a VT all about graining, because the guys have been struggling with their tyres here this weekend, but graining on the tyres is probably the last thing on their minds now. It's all about what tyre, isn't it?
Raining to raining, isn't it? And as Mike said a little while ago, surely it's going to be the full wet they're starting on. Watching at the end of the pit lane, that's what they're doing their reconnaissance laps on. Some cars who are in the second half of the field who've got the fuel to spare are having a look around the track, because under the regulations, it used to be that you had some free practice if it rained, just to prepare, but now that doesn't happen anymore. So these will be the first laps that these drivers ever done in these cars around this circuit in the wet.
What would you be wanting from your team in a situation like this, DC, tyre-wise and approach-wise?
Well, exactly as Martin mentioned, I'd be wanting to do an extra lap if I had the fuel available to just recce the circuit, feel where there might be some standing water, because you don't really want to be finding that out on the first lap when the cars are all swarming into a corner.
And it looks so good for Red Bull coming into this, sitting on pole, and it's now that the team are really going to earn their money, because their strategy in many ways is kind of out the window.
Yeah, I mean, in these conditions, you've got to call a strategy after 2-3 laps when you've seen what's happened on the open, because it can be chaos. I mean, I think the real losers in these conditions are Brawn. I think in the dry, they really had the car and the strategy, the fuel in it off the line to win the race. They'll still be confident, but one of the best places to be on the front is in conditions like this, especially into the corner one, tightens up really badly, really tightly. That's going to be very busy there on the opening lap.
Now, we talked earlier on about wanting to see a race finish under racing speeds, although it won't be quite as quick as normal. We would like to get to the end and not have the rain get heavier and have the kind of situation we had in Malaysia, Martin. That's not good for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Malaysia was one of the hardest Grand Prix I've ever commentated on, with so much going on. Half the field in the pit every other lap, and then, of course, the situation at the end, 52 minutes I think we had, trying to fill that. But we don't want that today. Safety car, might we get that? I'd be surprised if it's a safety car start at the moment, David, wouldn't you? It doesn't seem wet enough. You need a lot more standing water than this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, this being a relatively new track, it's not very bumpy. And it's interesting talking to Joe Bauer, the chief scrutineer, this morning. They have less technical faults reported after qualifying on a track like this than, say, someone like Monaco, where the cars are really shaken to pieces. So, it's a pretty steady rain. The full wet will handle this. I don't expect to see anyone start an intermediate in these conditions.
And visors are critical on the grid, aren't they, in these conditions as well? You hope that you had an example where you got the wrong helmet brought to the grid, didn't you, once?
Yeah, how about that happen where your helmet comes out of the bag and it's the wrong one, so you get a bit of a panic on. But anyway, these guys will be well prepared. Their trainers will bring the right helmets, and you would have thought with someone like Mike, with all his experience of Formula 1, would have brought a jacket to the grid. I think we're going to have to cut off him soon, or we're going to have a wet t-shirt competition going on here.
Well, actually, as an engineer, I always like to come without a rain jacket on to really know how wet it was. But when you had the wrong helmet, did your engineer tell you to stay cool, baby?
I never had that sort of intimate relationship that Felipe Massa obviously has with Rob Smedley. But yeah, that was the first time I've heard that sort of behaviour.
Right, let's talk Lewis Hamilton. So far this season, Jenson Button's been the man that's hogged the British headlines. How impressive is it what Lewis has achieved so far this season? If he'd have kept the points from Australia, 2 points finishes, and then qualifying 9th here, Martin?
I don't think it's that impressive. I don't think we've seen Lewis driving in the style that he normally does, where he's attacking the racetrack, but he looks happier here, I have to say. And, he's been busy helping them develop the car. Lots of turmoil going on in the team. And, at least he's kept his head in difficult circumstances. And this could be his kind of day. But his car looked a bit stiffly sprung to me in the dry, let alone in these conditions yesterday.
Well, I think in a moment we can have a look at Lewis on his outlap, making his way around to the grid, and you get an idea there of how torrential the rain is out on the track.
Yeah, obviously these front camera shots only tell part of the story. There doesn't seem to be that much standing water. We can see Lewis testing the grip of these tyres. Of course, he'll be able to change that particular set on the grid, so he's not worried about taking the edges off that full wet. But I think the real story as well for someone like Lewis is the amount of spray he's going to have at the start of the race. Starting where he is, by the time he gets halfway down to turn 1, he'll be driving into a wall of spray. He won't know where he is relative to the other cars, and that's when these guys really earn their money, because you're really just trusting the timing, the mental timing in your mind as to where the first corner is.
Right, Martin, we caught you under an umbrella. Are you ready to dive under a few more, have a poke around, see what's going on the grid?
I am. My grid walk strategy's out of the window because so many cars are not even here yet.
Full wets on down there?
Yeah, absolutely. DC, give us a hand. This might be a tricky one today. Let's go over and see young Vettel here on pole position, if we can find him. He's just under here talking to German TV. There's something that fascinates me just straight away looking here on pole. You've got a guy with a Renault coat on there. That engine is supplied by Renault. And right next door is the works Renault of Fernando Alonso. Where does his loyalties lie?
Well, of course, it's with this team. He works for Red Bull. He's supplying the engines here. So if they get the results, when you see the Renault guys within the Red Bull team getting the pole position yesterday, they're delighted. Obviously, they all build the engines back at the Viry base just outside Paris. But Renault have been very fair in their engine supply to Red Bull, and there's a very good collaboration. Yep. So maybe we'll get in behind Sebastian here. We'll be in beside Kai Ebel, who's the German presenter there with the rather natty red jacket. He normally sports some
Give him a little tweak on his bottom or something, whatever No, not him, the driver.
Oh,
Sebastian, we're here to make you famous. How's the track out there?
Wet.
How wet?
I was totally surprised. Sun is not shining. No, it's very wet. There's quite a lot of standing water, so I suppose everyone is on extreme wets.
And you're obviously still looking very cool after your single lap of qualifying. Strategy for this race? Simple, get to the front?
We will see. I mean, you know, we have the fuel on board, everyone knows, so we are coming quite early compared to the others. Let's see. You know, in the wet anything is possible, so you never know what's going to happen. Main thing is keep the car on track, and then we see.
You've got Alonso beside you on the grid. He's got barely enough fuel in the car to get out of its own way, I would imagine. So he's going to be pretty racy, isn't he, in the first few laps?
Yeah, he always has been in the past, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be now. So obviously the target is to stay ahead, and obviously use the grid position to pull a gap to the guys behind to make the best out of our strategy.
I see you have a little name, you name your car. There's a sticker that we saw earlier, and I think we'll see that graphic later on. Any other superstitions? Can you tell us about why you name your car?
Well, I think you should always have a kind of relationship to your car. You know, it's
your car's female, I presume.
Yes, always. All the cars I had so far are female, and yeah, I mean you ask a lot to the car, so you know it's not a holy relationship, but you know you respect her, so you know you try to treat her well. I mean you are the man when it comes to women, so.
I think we'd better leave before you get into any more trouble. See you later. Let's see if we can find Alonso on the front of the grid, DC. I have to tell you, in these conditions, drivers tend to look at you like you're trying to sell them double glazing. But there's a bit of a scrum there. I don't know if we can dive in and get anything. Normally, if I can find Patricia, she gets the job done for us. Patricia, can you do it? We're just live with BBC here. Yeah? That would help. I'm getting caught up here. And how long is they going to be? Do you know? That's okay. I think we're next. Now, we booked months ago, honestly. This is...
Well, this is pretty impressive, Martin. Now I know
it
from the other side.
Now, how did you feel when people were coming up to you on the grid and like this? Did you mind it?
No, I always enjoyed it, actually, because I got into focusing the 15 minutes before the start of the race when everyone leaves the grid. That's when I started to get in the zone. But at this point here, I was quite happy to talk to people.
Yeah, I used to get nervous about half an hour before the race, and then it just went away, and I never felt more in control than sitting on the grid. I'd done all my work, I'd done the best I could, and what was going to happen was going to happen. You got enough space there, Matt. Yeah, we're going to be very short, honestly.
I spoke to Fernando before, so he was happy to talk to us. But
yeah, I don't know which language he's talking in there, but
multi-talented, of course. He speaks 3 languages, so
he does indeed. But we got to get a quick word in. Patricia, we're going to need to do this because we've got millions of people sitting here and they're getting really bored. Fernando, so you've never finished outside of the top 4 here, or the points, of course. How do you feel about today?
We see. I think we have a completely different race now with wet conditions, so nobody knows. We know that we have to really finish the race, which is always a good result in this type of conditions. Many retirements, many accidents. So we go for some points. We see how many.
Fernando, I've always wanted to know, when you win a Grand Prix, you do a little stand on your car with your hands up by your ears. What is that message? Can you tell us?
It's a secret. I cannot tell you now. I keep changing always. It's a different message from my friends. And maybe when we have a dinner together before the Grand Prix, they said, if you win now, you do this, you do that. So it's more a joke with them.
Now, do you think this should be a safety car start? Is it wet enough for that?
It's close. It's close. I think if it's a safety car start, we will all agree. If it's not a safety car, I think the conditions are not dramatically bad. So with extreme tires, you can deal with the first lap as well.
Okay, thanks for your time. Let's head off. I don't know if there's anybody else we can find. We've got Rubens here, 3rd on the grid. He, of course, is the real pole sitter. That's what I hate about Rubens is in the car, but this qualifying system, fuel corrected, the old man, Barrichello, in the car was actually fastest in qualifying, wasn't he?
Well, that is the thing that's confusing, you know, when we get all excited about the pole position, but it's not, it sound like an old fart here, but it's not like the real qualifyings we saw in the past where you knew the quickest car or driver combination was at the front. Obviously the fuel dominates that now.
Yeah, let's just wander down and see if we can get anywhere near Lewis Hamilton's car. 9th on the grid, and I can just see it down there. I don't know if he's in the car or not. If he is, we'll obviously abandon and get out of here. Little Rosberg, he goes well in the rain.
Should we not go and see your friends at Toyota while we're doing that? Or
they've covered all their rear wing up and their whole car. It's one of the few times in the regulations you're allowed to cover the car is when it's raining, of course. But wandering up to the Macca boys, they're having a fairly torrid time at the moment. I don't know if we can find young Hamilton. He doesn't appear to be on the grid, does he? Where's Lewis?
No.
Do you know, Steve?
Sorry, mate?
Where's Lewis?
He just popped over to the garage.
He's over in the garage.
Means he's gone to the toilet, doesn't it?
Back to you, Jake.
All right, Martin, thanks very much. Good effort. Shame about Lewis. And I like the fact there that Martin mentioned they've covered over the Toyota because of the rain. I'm sure it's really because they knew he was coming. And, of course, you had Martin mention there that Rubens Barrichello is the real pole sitter. Well, that's all because qualifying doesn't necessarily tell us who's got the quickest car. It just tells us who's got the fastest car. It's all about the weights, and here's Ted with the details.
Qualifying here was particularly deceptive. Sebastian Vettel's margin over the rest of the field looks huge if they'd all started their laps at the same time, but he only has 30 kilos of race fuel on board. Behind him, Fernando Alonso's even lighter with 23 kilos, while the brawns of Barrichello and Button have 47 and 45 kilos respectively. So what that means is that fuel adjusted, Rubens Barrichello is actually on pole. He did a superb job, out-qualifying Jenson by 0.06 of a second while carrying 2 kilos more fuel. The Brawns are still the quickest cars by about 0.2 of a second per lap from the Toyota, who've been closed on by Red Bull. Renault have made the biggest improvement. They're now just 0.4 behind Red Bull. Ferrari and Williams have actually gone backwards since Malaysia, while McLaren have actually found a couple of tenths. So here are the predicted laps for the first pit stops. Alonso, lap 9 on a 3-stop strategy. Vettel, lap 11. Webber, lap 12. The cars more comfortable on the super soft tyre will 2-stop, such as the Brawns. Lap 17 for Button and 18 for Barrichello, while Trulli is heavier by 1 lap. The McLarens are running a long first stint, Lewis Hamilton going to lap 24 and Heikki Kovalainen to lap 30.
So Rubens Barrichello is the real pole sitter. Just explain to us why someone like Fernando Alonso, in the car that he's got, would only put 9 laps of fuel in and try and gun it right to the front. What's the strategy with that? Is it to impress people?
Well, if we look at it just in pure terms of strategy, assuming they all had the same speed of car, if you look at the strategy, Jenson is actually on about the optimum strategy, looking on tyre degradation and how the fuel drops out, the speed of the car changes. If you actually look at it, Fernando is actually on strategy about 12 seconds slower because of where he stops in the race. Lewis, on the other hand, going later, stopping in lap 24, he's actually only about 2 seconds on strategy slower. So he's actually in a good position. And actually with this rain, he'll like that. He's got more flexibility in when he stops. Obviously, difficult for Fernando. He's got to come in early on. But that was all in the dry. Obviously, in the wet, that all changes. And, of course, that all assumes they've got the same pace of car. In reality, we know that Jenson and Rubens in that Brawn, they have a quicker car as well.
Right, there's a lot more to talk about who you think is going to go well and not go well today. But let's quickly hear from John Howard of Toyota. We've heard that Timo Glock is starting from the pit lane. I think Ted can give us some more details. He's with John.
Yes, well, Robert Kubica and Timo Glock, it seems, starting from the pit lane. John Howard, the boss, what's the thinking?
Well, I think it looks like full wet. So we probably wait till the light goes green and put some fuel in the car, but we have to wait to see.
But you didn't have such a bad fuel wait for the...
light. If it's full wet should last a reasonable time, so we think there's more opportunity probably to run longer.
I mean, Timo's been absolutely brilliant with his wet weather calls recently.
Yeah, and also he's very strong in the wet. So, yeah, for him it could be good.
OK, thanks, John.
And that's the story, really, isn't it? If you're a strong driver and it's wet, this could work in your favour here.
Yeah, I think what they're doing there is...
Have you heard anything from the FIA, Pat, whether it's going to be a safety car start or not?
It is going to be a safety car start, yeah, the lights are on. They go on at 10 minutes before the start if it is a safety car start, so that's what we're with. I hope it's only for a few laps because it's probably the worst thing that can happen to us.
Well, indeed, because you're light, and if it had been a normal start, you would have been able to go out and build a lead.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you want to keep your window open if it's wet, but equally if it's light and you can sprint and you've got good visibility, it'd be good. But to be honest, I think the safety car only need to be out for a couple of laps, so let's see what they do.
OK, thanks, Pat.
BBC commentary for younger viewers. There's also 5 Live commentary on there as well, and some extra information if you would like to have that. And of course, you can also watch all of our coverage whenever a car is on track on the BBC website, bbc.co.uk/sport. Right, one word answer. Give me a winner for today in the rain.
I still think Jenson is going to be able to do it.
You say Jenson. I say let's get to the race. Here it is, the 2009 Chinese Grand Prix.